Hello and welcome to Contact Payroll Online Training. I'm Rupert. In this chapter, I will be introducing the employee transactions, which basically brings the employee master file and the transaction master file together. So I'm going to open up my payroll program, log in with the default username and password. We don't want to view the message. I'm going to just briefly show you I've got one employee record and I've got a couple of cost centers being set up. And remember, in Contact Payroll, our transactions from the transaction master file, which is here, is linked back to my cost centers and then linked back to an employee. And I'm going to show you now. If you would go into your 6 steps of processing, we're going to cover step 1. So there's my employee. So I'm going to step 1, input by employee. I'm selecting my employee record, and that is basically my transaction mask. So here I could add transactions. So when I click insert, it brings up a list of transactions. Now, very noticeable on the screen at the moment is that there's only red transactions, which is deductions, and 2 green transactions, which is contributions. So if I would like to add a payment transaction, let's say this guy should be paid monthly, I add a monthly transaction, it automatically adds it into the list. So what it actually did at this point, it's very important, is that it took the transaction number 200 and it added into the cost center 001 ADM, which is Pretoria Administration. So if this employee belongs to another cost center, let's say to Cape Town Administration, this transaction will not show up on his transaction mask, which is important if we start processing hundreds or even thousands of employees at the same time. So I would like to select this transaction by double click, putting in an amount, click on OK, and then I do my calculation. And the reason why the pay as you earn is so high on the 30,000 Rand is because my apportioned days worked 5. Remember, when I've set up this employee, I've specified the start date, and the payroll then calculated, and it actually gave the message, but I clicked it away. When you open up this employee, it actually tells you, okay, it now recorded it, so it won't ask again. But it basically asks you that this employee has only worked 5 days. Would you like to accept the calculation? So this person now worked 5 days for 30,000 Rand, and that is actually why he is being overtaxed. So if you would appoint an employee on the 15th of a month, but pay him the full salary that he would have gotten for the whole month, he will be overtaxed, because he will then pay more tax because he only worked 15 days for the same amount that he would have worked for a whole month. So that is why I am currently overtaxed on this employee. So I've added that transaction. Say for instance, I'm going to show you, say for instance, I would like to add overtime. You would get to the drop down box, go to overtime 1.5. It's not yet listed here, so I need to say add transaction. So it adds that transaction to 001 ADM. So it adds that transaction to my cost center Pretoria Administration. So when I double click on overtime and I put in, for example, 5 hours, it will take my hourly rate, which is 173.050, which then comes from my hourly rate times the factor of 1.5, and then works out 173, which is the hourly rate, times by 5, which gives me 865.25. Clicking OK. Now, if I had another employee that worked for Pretoria Administration, you would not need to go to transaction master file and re-add it, because it is already on that cost center. So if you've got a transaction which is already listed on the left hand side, it means it's already part of the cost center. You can just use that transaction. You only add from the right what is not existent in the list on the left. So I've added those transactions, and I can say do calculation, and then the payroll will calculate that my tax, which is on the 30,000 and the overtime of 865, is then 10,763. Of course, that's for the shorter period of 5 days. So I've only worked 5 days for 30,000 plus 865, and that's why I'm I'm being overtaxed. Then, of course, you've got your leave transactions on the screen, which I'm not going to go in. You've got your period details, summary analysis, tax analysis, recurring balances, year-to-date transactions.